Olivia Maurel was born through surrogacy and is now fighting against it. It's been a little over a year since a speech given in the Czech Republic Parliament, and it's a topic that has generated as much attention as the Pope's statement.
And we can imagine that everyone watching this video can guess our stance on it. Let's talk about it.
Before we begin, please subscribe and ring that notification bell to stay updated on future videos. Let's dive into the video. Let's start.
Play.
I'd like to thank everyone here that invited me to tell my side of the story as a child born from surrogacy and now fighting against surrogacy. I'm grateful and extremely honored to be in such a place. This is more than I expected, and I am very emotional, I have to say. My entire story I will share with you with a lot of sincerity, a lot of humility. It's the first time I'm speaking in front of such a big group of people that are so bright, so I'm a little nervous, I have to say. But I do think that my words today are important. Because all too often, unfortunately, we forget the people that are the most affected by surrogacy. But these people, they never give their consent, they never have their word, and those are the children that are born from surrogacy.
Stop the video. So, her first issue is the fact that these babies don't consent to being born through surrogacy. Let's just look at all of these millions of babies born every single day that are born and are not giving their consent to be born into a life of privilege or a life of poverty or a life of going into the care system.
No one gives consent.
Oh my God, that's just silly. Come on.
Come on now, dog. Come on, man.
These children that are ripped from their mothers at birth.
Ripped from their mothers at birth. Like,
where's this happening?
yeah, I mean, like, really, is that the reality? Because I know we saw both of our children being born, and none of them, I mean, yes, they had a C-section, and they weren't ripped.
No.
You know, it's like, how, yeah.
To be sold to strangers.
Kind of like sold to strangers.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
This article's gonna we're gonna be slapping this space bar.
Sold to strangers.
Cars that you order from factories that you, pick options that you may or may not like. And these children are considered just like vulgar objects and products.
By who?
I am today a product of surrogacy. Created, sold, bought. And I'd like to tell you my side of the story so you can understand how it affected me and why today we can't just simply regulate surrogacy. We have to abolish it purely and simply for the good of the child and, of course, for the rights of children.
Well, I don't think
a child should never be the subject of such a contract, and above all, should never, ever be the subject of a transaction. So as I said, we're now going to travel back 40 years. That's when my story all started, even before my own birth. My intended parents met. My intended mother already had a son with another man. My parents had a very successful business, very, very smart people. I have to give them that. My mother was 11 years older than my father. The money was flowing. They were at the peak of their careers. And I do believe that at some point my mother kind of forgot her biological clock. And so at one point they decided to start a family, but it was a little too late. At this stage, my father was 48. My father, was 37 and my mother was 48. And my mother already had problems with infertility. According to my father, with whom I had a recent discussion, he wanted a child from his own genes. So adoption was completely out of the picture. And surrogacy to them was the only option rather than giving up on having a child. Selfish decision, I believe, but It's their story. So they looked up the United States, and more specifically Louisville, Kentucky, to find an agency that could help them find a surrogate mother. My parents first gave the agency, of course, a list of criteria concerning the woman that what she should look like. Yeah. I personally was born through traditional surrogacy, not gestational surrogacy, so my surrogate mother is biologically related to me. Even though, to my opinion, it makes absolutely no difference if the mother is biologically linked to the child or not, because to me, the mother is the one who has the child inside her womb for 9 months and, of course, gives birth to the child. About a year goes by. We're in 1991. My parents had a surrogate mother, but she wasn't holding the embryos. And so they had to be rematched with what would be my biological mother. And thankfully, she got pregnant only 2 months after signing the contract. It's often said that the agencies look at women's psychology through very thorough tests, that they make sure they don't have any debt to pay. But we know that that's not true. $14 billion was the surrogacy market in 2022. And do you honestly think that we're going to look too closely at women who might even lie during their interviews? I don't think so. My case is a perfect example. My biological mother, and she wasn't mentally stable. She had a huge history with depression. But on top of that, just before I was born, she had lost a son, age of 2.5 years old, in an absolute tragic domestic accident. So I think you can put yourself in her place. Mentally, she wasn't there at all.
Stop, please. And this is the importance of why screening is essential in terms of the welfare of anyone who chooses to be a surrogate, right? Mm-hmm. Making sure that they are physically and mentally prepared and well to be a surrogate. And what this woman is explaining, obviously is super raw to her, as we're going to continue to find out. But this is a person who should have never been a surrogate in the first place if this is what we're hearing. Because this trauma, this past loss prior to becoming a surrogate, this is not a candidate for the surrogate. It's especially not traditional surrogacy.
It's not. And also people have to take accountability. You know, if that surrogate continued in the way that she did and was successful in being a surrogate, she's clearly not disclosed all of these elements. So, you know, there was intent there. And look, you know, and this is one case. Let's just not tar every single surrogate in the world with the same brush. You know, there's lots of different scenarios, but ultimately we're hearing about one story. Yes, it's a very powerful one. She's at the Czech Parliament talking about it, so it's very kind of out there and is designed to influence policymakers around surrogacy. And I'm hoping that they had a more balanced view from other people so that they were getting on.
Was completely devastated after that. She was in debt and she had to put on a brave face for her family, her children, and her husband. This agency that only saw what it wanted to see when it hired her, and that's the money that she could generate. They abused of the situation of a woman that needed money to feed her children and pay her bills. So I was born on December 10th, 1991, a date that was chosen actually by my intended parents because, funny enough, it fell between my intended mother's birthday, who was born on December 5th, and my biological mother, who was born on December 15th. I had to be a Christmas baby, actually. But even that was decided for me. Can you imagine? In surrogacy, births can even be planned out and decided. And I'm not quite sure how that is in the best interest of the child.
Okay, and that's the same for any pregnancy. Any pregnancy
specific to surrogacy.
No, it's not. Any elective cesarean can be planned if it's safe for the child to happen. You can't just pluck a date out the air because that's the date that you want. This has to be safe for the child and for the person giving birth.
Yeah, but again, not specific to surrogacy.
And that's where it gets a bit emotional for me. As soon as I was born, I wasn't placed in the arms of my biological mother. The mother who had carried me for 9 months, the one who fed me, the one who spoke to me, the one who I felt every emotion invade her when she was pregnant, the one who in the end was the only person I knew. No, I had to take the great leap of the infant out of my mother's womb into the cold, austere world, the hospital lights, and I had to be sold and finalize the transaction into the arms of my adoptive parents, whom I didn't know. And that, unfortunately, was the first trauma that would write the rest of my life, the trauma of abandonment. So as a child, I was already showing signs of the trauma of abandonment. My parents couldn't leave me. I would be hysterical. I was a very complicated child. I was always afraid of rejection. I had trouble making friends.
What I would say to this, and look, this is her story. I'm not saying she's wrong. This is how she feels. This is her story. But like knowing, having 2 children through surrogacy, the whole nurture versus nature environment, there's so many dynamics at play, and I just don't think it's as black and white as she's kind of alluding to in her story. Again, it's her story, so I don't want to, be disrespectful of that, but that isn't how I see it, and it's not the way that I think.
And it's also not how we see families that we have not only helped support and grow, but those in our community and friends that have had families through surrogacy with children that go into their teens and that are now adults. They
see the world very different.
They see this very different. This feels very raw to her and is very unique to how she clearly feels.
Parents couldn't leave me anywhere. Sleepovers, parties. I would go in this hysterical crisis. And so they couldn't leave me. I was just afraid, unfortunately, that I would suffer a second abandonment every time they left me.
And I also knew there's a lot more at play here than just surrogacy.
Mm-hmm. And we haven't seen this video. This is the first time we're watching this video. But I'm instantly thinking that, and I don't know how this ends, but clearly this feeling of abandonment and this impact on this person's mental health clearly goes a lot deeper. That feeling of second abandonment as a child, I just can't comprehend how you can know and experience, when she talks about the hospital lights, I'm just like, I can't
remember last week.
No, let alone, I don't remember being born.
40 years ago.
It's just...
But again, this is her story.
At that point in time, I was already going through an inner battle. How could I build myself without knowing where I came from?
Yes.
During my adult life, things got worse. I sank into alcohol addictions. I even was raped because I was constantly putting myself on edge. I made several suicide attempts. My life wasn't the best. I had a hard time having normal friendships. I would suffocate people because I was afraid that they would leave me. I was alone. I was very, very lonely. I sank into a lot of depressions. I'm sorry. I was also never able to find a good job. I wasn't stable. And I had a hard time finishing my studies. Then, thank God, I met my husband, who gradually helped me rebuild my life as it is today, with a lot of patience, a lot of love. He let me lash out all my emotions and understood exactly why I reacted the way I would. Today, I have 3 beautiful children, but unfortunately, they in turn suffer from my traumas. My daughter, my oldest, Eleanor, suffers from the trauma of abandonment, and my son, Theodore, my second, suffers from the trauma of rejection. Unfortunately, they suffer in turn from the traumas because I do thoroughly believe that all of these are transgenerational. So surrogacy didn't just affect me. Thank you. Thank you. Surrogacy didn't just affect me. Unfortunately, it affects my own children today. They, of course, have help. I had proof of the fact that I was born from surrogacy through a DNA test when I turned 30. I'm 31 today.
Okay, stop.
But that was...
There we go. Pennies dropping. So this makes a bit more sense as to why she is so angry about abandonment and why she may have felt or suspected to be different from her parents. Not being told or finding out through a DNA test when you're 30, I can absolutely understand why that would stink. And that's why that level of not telling, not talking, not disclosing is not how people operate with surrogacy these days. I'm not saying that this is how people that went through donor conception 40 years ago would have hidden the fact of that. But this is not how surrogacy is practiced today.
Or shouldn't be. I think it's always about understanding the impact of the decisions you're making when you are navigating to a surrogacy, and not always just necessarily thinking about the here and now, but thinking about the longer term, challenges that can arise from it, and talking and telling and being transparent about the origins or your genetic origins early on, or when appropriate, to be able to handle it, helps stop these types of situations and these types of scenarios.
Just escalating.
The physical proof, because I always knew inside of me, that I didn't fit in. I had problems with my mother. I saw that I didn't connect with her. I connected with my dad a little bit more because he was biologically linked to me. But
I don't know how that connection thing. No, as the dad of two children, one bio-linked, one not, it makes no difference. And again, this is her reality, but it's not the reality that we...
No, and as well, we have different relationships with our children. I don't love them any different from each other, but it's okay to have a different relationship with your mom or with your dad or with your dad or with your dad or with your mom and your mom.
And it happens, and I'm sure that happens in
every
traditional families.
It's not unique to surrogacy.
Things didn't seem right. And I knew inside me something was wrong. We children, we're not stupid, We're very, very smart people. And not so long ago, I was diagnosed with bipolar disease. Shouldn't shock any of you after everything I just told you. My biological mother, so my surrogate mother, she herself battles with mental issues. And I do believe I inherited that from her. But how could I know? I never had access to my medical records on her side, and everything was hidden from me. And she could have lied during the process, eventually. In fact, when I got pregnant from my first child, Eleanor, I was scared to death. I was scared to death because I didn't know what I would be passing on to my baby. Cancer, a genetic disease, mental health issues. It's mind-boggling to me to find that it's in the best interest of the child to hide all of this information from them all their lives. Sorry.
Says being life.
And that is a brief summary of my life. Very, very brief. I could speak for hours on my life and all the problems that surrogacy has caused me. There are consequences. Look at me. Two people, my intended parents, 31 years ago, they made a small decision, then a bigger one, and then a more trivial one. And one decision after another, I came to the world. And on that day, I was the consequence of a small choice made by two people at a time when I didn't even exist. And this choice, it defined my entire existence. I'm a consequence, and I hope that soon it will be me who will bring about consequences to abolish the atrocity of surrogacy. But be careful. In my words, you'll never see me blaming my parents. They used a process that was just an option offered to them on a silver platter, and they didn't have the strength to resist it. Today, I don't feel any hatred for them. I don't blame them. I love them. But however, I do blame the system that is slowly but surely allowing surrogacy to be legalized. First, we approved the use of surrogacy for medical reasons, such as infertility. After, we accept it for social reasons. And then we accept it for anything and everything. And for reasons of human trafficking, the sale of children, the unavailability of the human body, for ethical, bioethical reasons, surrogacy has to be abolished. But in my humble opinion, and I'm not a doctor or I'm just a child, the greatest reason to abolish this monstrosity is for the sake of the child, for his or her rights, for a psychic balance that he or she, like me, may never ever regain. And I'm just going to finish with this. And this is to all of you that may think that this is normal, surrogacy is normal and we should maybe regulate it. If just one child like me has encountered so many problems in his or her life as a result of surrogacy, that should be enough to convince all of you that there's nothing good about this process and that nothing can make it ethical, despite all of your attempts to persuade yourself otherwise. Thank you for your time.
I think there's a lot to unpack in just that last section of what she was saying, but I think ultimately my take on this is that, you've got to take some accountability outside of surrogacy for this. This is like, I think in my mind, it's really clear to you that surrogacy hasn't caused all this. You may attribute it to it, but I think, I just don't know. I mean, I'm no psychologist. I'm no expert in all of those elements, but I'm just looking at this thinking,
this is a very, hard account to listen to and a very troubled individual. And I think that trauma goes way deeper than how they were conceived. Yes, there could be links to the mental health of the person who donated their egg for her to be the woman that she is today. And, there's so many other things to unpack that have really scarred this individual's experience. And this is not true of all of the stories and all of the people and the families and the children and the adults born through surrogacy that we speak to and we hear their accounts and their stories.
And I mean, it's sad that
it's really sad that this is her viewpoint.
No, but it's really sad that in her world, surrogacy has had such a negative impact on her family, her children. Like, I struggle to understand how you can attribute all of that to surrogacy. But again, this is her reality, and this is the lens she looks through, and this is how she sees the world.
But whether
we don't have to agree with it.
No, well, we don't agree with it.
We don't agree with it at all, and I struggle to watch it. And some of the things she was referencing, that's not the reality I see. With the hundreds of people we're helping. No.
And also, let's put this into context. She's speaking in a parliament which is a great audience for this type of controversial narrative in terms of the right-wing government and their views on things like IVF, surrogacy, LGBTQ relationships and same-sex marriage. This is an audience that's
susceptible to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So don't agree with her. Feel really sorry for her that this is a narrative.
But
next.
Yes, please. So these are our thoughts. We'd love to hear yours. Comment below. Let us know how you feel, even if you disagree, but please be respectful.
If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for every time we post a video for you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.